You've read 17 books on how to start a business, and you still haven't started one. That's not a diss. That's just what happens to a certain kind of person. And if you're watching this, there's a decent chance you're that person. The one with the tabs open. The one with the course half finished. The one who knows more about the theory of something than most people who actually do it for a living. And somehow that knowledge hasn't turned into a single real result.
Here's the stat that should mess with you a little. Researchers looked at how much information people actually retain, depending on how they learned it. And passive learning, sitting there reading or watching or listening, tops out around 5 to 10% retention after a couple weeks. Doing the thing yourself, actually practicing it, gets you up near 75%. That's not a small gap. That's the difference between remembering almost nothing and remembering almost everything. Imagine two people trying to learn how to change a tire. One reads a 40-page manual 3 times. The other just gets under the car and does it once. Badly, maybe scrapes a knuckle. 6 months later, guess who can still do it blind in the rain at 11 at night? It's not the manual guy. It never is. So why does this happen? Why do some people learn by doing and just absorb things like a sponge, while other people, often smarter people, stay stuck in research mode for years? It comes down to something psychologists call the difference between declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. Declarative knowledge is knowing facts. You could tell someone exactly how a bicycle works, the physics of balance, the mechanics of pedaling, the way steering shifts your center of gravity. Procedural knowledge is actually being able to ride the thing without falling over. These live in different parts of your brain. Declarative stuff sits in your hippocampus, easy to access, easy to talk about at a dinner party. Procedural stuff gets built into your basal ganglia and your cerebellum through repetition, through actual physical or mental reps, and it doesn't care how many books you've read. It only responds to doing.
This is why you can watch 100 videos on how to cook a steak and still burn the first one you make. Watching activates your visual and language centers. It feels like learning because your brain is lighting up, you're taking mental notes, you're nodding along. But none of that builds the actual neural pathway for judging heat by sound, for knowing when to flip by smell, for adjusting on the fly when the pan's hotter than you expected. That pathway only gets built by standing at the stove and messing it up a few times. People who learn by doing have, whether they know it or not, made peace with being bad at something in public, or at least in front of themselves. That's the real skill underneath the skill. It's not that they're smarter or more talented, it's that they've lowered the emotional cost of failing at the first attempt. Most people treat their first attempt like it's supposed to be a performance. Doers treat their first attempt like it's supposed to be a rough draft. Nobody judges a rough draft. You just fix it. There's a concept from motor learning research called the specificity of practice, and it basically says your brain gets good at exactly what you rehearse, not what you understand. If you rehearse thinking about a skill, you get good at thinking about that skill. If you rehearse doing a skill, you get good at doing it. Sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but almost nobody actually organizes their learning around it. We default to consuming because consuming feels safe. Nobody's watching you read a book and laughing. But the second you try to actually do the thing, in real time, in front of yourself, or worse, in front of other people, that's when the fear shows up. And a huge number of people, without even realizing it, quietly choose the version of learning that avoids that fear. They call it being thorough. They call it doing their research. Really, it's just a very well-disguised form of stalling. Now here's the part that surprises people. Learning by doing isn't actually about being fearless. The people who are best at it aren't calm about failing, they just fail faster and more often, which changes the math. If you're willing to take 20 bad swings this week while someone else takes 0 swings because they're still reading the swing manual, you're not braver than them. You've just built up 20 data points they don't have. Your brain used those 20 failed attempts to prune away what doesn't work. That's literally how neural pathways get carved, through a process called synaptic pruning, where the connections you use get stronger and the ones you don't use fade out. Every failed rep is your brain doing subtraction. Every hour spent reading about the rep is your brain doing nothing but storage. There's also a weird trust thing that happens with people who learn by doing. They tend to trust their own judgment faster because they've built a track record of adjusting on the fly.
Think about someone who's cooked 1,000 meals without a recipe versus someone who's read 1,000 recipes and cooked 10 meals. The first person has a gut feeling about whether a dish needs more acid or more salt. The second person is still checking a chart in their head. That gut feeling isn't magic, it's compressed experience. It's your brain running a lifetime of small experiments and giving you the output without making you consciously replay all the data. People who avoid doing never get access to that. They stay stuck consulting external sources for decisions that a doer just feels in their hands. Something else worth saying, because it's the part people don't like hearing. A lot of the reading, the researching, the planning isn't actually about learning at all. It's about control. It feels like you're moving forward because information feels like progress. But information without application is just anxiety wearing a productive outfit. You get to feel smart, you get to feel prepared, and you never have to face the version of yourself that might be bad at the thing. Doing forces a confrontation. It puts a mirror up. You either can do it or you can't. And right now, in this moment, with no more prep time. Some part of the brain, the same part that avoids public speaking and cold plunges and hard conversations, knows that and steers you back toward the safety of another article, another course. But here's the flip side, and it's the more hopeful part. This isn't a personality trait you're either born with or not. It's a habit loop, and habit loops can be rebuilt at any age. The people who seem naturally wired to learn by doing usually just had an early experience, maybe a parent who threw them into a task without much hand-holding, maybe a job that didn't give them the luxury of overthinking, maybe just one moment where they tried something imperfectly and it worked out fine anyway. That one experience taught their nervous system that doing isn't dangerous. And once your nervous system believes that, doing gets easier every single time after, because your brain stops treating a bad first attempt like a threat and starts treating it like data collection. You can build that same belief on purpose. It doesn't take some dramatic reinvention. It takes shrinking the gap between learning something and trying it. Not reading 3 chapters before you touch the guitar. Picking it up after chapter 1, playing something ugly, and letting that ugly sound teach you faster than the 4th chapter would have. Not watching 5 more tutorials on how to have a hard conversation with your boss. Having a slightly clumsy version of that conversation this week and letting the clumsiness itself be the lesson. The gap between exposure and action is where all the learning leaks out. Close that gap, and your brain starts building real, usable, load-bearing knowledge instead of the decorative kind you can recite but never use. And there's a strange kindness in that too, because it means you don't have to wait until you feel ready. Readiness is a feeling manufactured by your nervous system to keep you safe, not a measurement of your actual ability. Most people who are great at things now were once mediocre at them, in public. They just didn't let that stop the reps from happening. The embarrassment faded. The competence stayed. Nobody remembers your first attempt at anything except you. And even you stop remembering it once the 10th attempt replaces it in your memory. So if you've been circling something for months or years, learning about it instead of learning it, that's not a character flaw, and it's definitely not proof you're not cut out for it. It's just your brain defaulting to the version of learning that feels safest instead of the version that actually works. The people who look like naturals were never actually naturals. They were just willing to be bad at something in real time long enough for their brain to quietly turn that badness into skill. You were never missing the knowledge. You were missing the willingness to be temporarily terrible at something in front of the one person who was always going to find out anyway, which is you. If any of this hit home, buying me a coffee through the link in the description helps keep these videos coming. Every bit genuinely makes a difference.